Om Shri Sai Ram. On this happy and joyous occasion of his birthday, I take this opportunity to greet each and every one of you. And with that feeling, I offer all our salutations at his lotus feet. This is a beautiful and small presentation that describes his sweetness in our lives through the various ups and downs that we face, through the various things that we go through, and how his loving, compassionate glance guides us and guards us through every turn in life. This is something that we should share with as many people as possible. And the reason to bring this beautiful series, it's in some sense a Vahini. Vahini is nothing but a carrier of a message or a messenger. Once in the interview room, Swami was interacting with the students and he gave a very beautiful example. He said, when an ant finds a grain of sugar, what does it do? It doesn't just take that sugar and keep it to itself. The moment you see that one ant has found a sugar cube, it goes and tells the other ant, see, I have tasted this sweetness. I have found this sugar. You all should also go. I'll lead you. I'll show you where it comes from or where the sugar is. And he leads. That's one ant leads all the others so that they all are in a position to taste that sweetness. Similarly, Swami said, if you have come here, if you have tasted even a bit of sweetness, if you have tasted it, it is your duty to go back and tell others the sweetness that you have tasted. And in doing so, you will lead them to me. With that beautiful prayer and submission, it's a humble endeavor to present a few of those sugar cubes in front of all of you so that you can taste the sweetness. It doesn't mean in any way that you all do not have. Everyone has, but it's just the bane of time and availability given the current circumstances that we cannot interact with a whole lot of people. But I'm sure in due course of time we'll get this opportunity to taste the sweetness that he has filled in each one of our lives.
Sai Ram. Since I was a child, I have always been obsessed with dramas that were put in front of Swami. And I was very clear that one day I will write a drama and I will teach everybody the dance, I'll do everything for it, I'll direct the drama, bring it up, it will be put up in front of Swami, and he's going to walk to me in the darshan line, he will stop and he will ask me, who is the director? And I will look at him and say, Swami, you Swami. So as a child and even as an adult, I feel like all my wonderful, memorable experiences with Swami have all been related to dramas. Ones that I have participated in as an SSE student and ones that I have been a part of as an SSE guru. As a child, I lived in Chennai and we used to go to Parthi for Swami's birthday. So we went for his 78th birthday, 75th birthday, 80th birthday to put up dramas. And what would happen is while it's a fantastic opportunity to actually to perform in front of the presence of the Lord, right? But also there are so many learnings that are embedded in the process of taking that drama to Swami's physical presence. We would have so many practices that were so rigorous. I remember I was speaking in front of Swami for one of the dramas, and my script, I was giving background voice, and my script would literally read like a musical sheet. So every word, this word has a higher intonation, this word has a lower intonation. So the perfection and the production value that goes into offering something in front of Swami was so high, and that was a marker as to how the rest of our lives have to be, right? Every time we say, as a child itself, we knew if you say we're giving this to you, Swami, the perfection associated with it had to be really, really high. So that was a big lesson and learning I had as an SSE student. The other enjoyable part of being in the drama was just the other students you are with, right? They're all young. We're all 8, 9, 10. But even then, some of them are so much in tune with what makes Swami pleased with you. They would say, why don't we sit and do 108 times Gayatri when we're sitting in darshan line waiting for Swami to come? Or they will say, let's not waste food, let's finish everything because that will make Swami happy. So just being around such inspiring little kids. I was a little kid myself, but it was easy to pick up and imitate them and try and become like them. I do want to share how I got to speak in before Swami for the first time. As a child, when I was around 8 years old, I was I was put up for a storytelling competition. Now, there were multiple rounds to the storytelling competition, metro level, state level, etc. And the final prize, they said, was it wasn't confirmed, you would probably get the certificate from Swami if you win, or you might even get a chance to speak in front of Swami. Now, I was very excited, to practice a lot, and remember the topic was on truth. And I finished a few rounds. So one of the critical rounds, I was telling my story. It was a storytelling competition. And someone came into the class and they stopped. So the guru who was judging me stopped me from talking, and she asked whatever the information was, and then she asked me to continue. But unfortunately, what happened in this process is that the timer had not stopped. So while my story was within the prescribed time limit of 3 minutes, because she had not stopped when someone came in, I ended up talking. I was disqualified from the storytelling competition. And I was heartbroken, right? Like at 8 years old, you're really sad. That was your opportunity to go up in front of Swami. But then, my mother would always say his delays are not his denials, so you have to hold on, you'll get it. And years passed, 4 years passed. I was again nominated for another storytelling competition. I went for that, and one of the gurus thought that I spoke well, and so they called me. This was in November. They called me and said, we're actually looking for a narrator, or a new narrator completely, for a drama that's going up in front of Swami's presence. So please come for audition. So I went for the audition. It was on November 8th, and for some reason they had to replace the old narrator. I went for the audition and I got the part for speaking in front of Swami. It was a crazy 15 days to put it all up, to get trained up to speak in front of Swami. And I thought this was it. This was my chance. This is going to make up for that 4 years ago when I wasn't able to speak. But then what happened was, just a day before we were going to Parthi, they said we have to record her bit as well, because we're shifting the drama from Purnachandra Hall to the Kulwant Hall. So we're going to have to record everybody who's speaking. We can't have anything live. And I thought, there went my chance to speak before him again. And I recorded my bit. I went to Parthi. I thought I'll just mime my words when my voice is resounding in the hall. And the morning of the drama, they changed the plan again and said, no, this child, she has to speak live. Something has gone wrong. She has to speak live. So I was ecstatic, didn't know what happened, but I ended up speaking live, got that 2 minutes that Swami had promised me 4 years ago. At least I had made Swami promise me 4 years ago. But then I spoke with people after that as to why that decision was changed, why I was not going to be recorded. And they said that it was because the recording that I had submitted, that we had done in Chennai, when it went to Puttaparthi, and they played it in Kulwant Hall before the drama, they realized that the last words of the recording was Jai Sai Ram. Sai Ram was missing in that entire, and we have played that so many times in Chennai to ensure that the quality was fine before we sent it to Parthi. But finally on that day in Kulwant Hall, whatever they did, the Sai Ram wouldn't play. And they said, we need the little child to come back and speak, because that's so important to the script. And that's how Swami balanced in his delays, but definitely not his denials. So that to me has always been, every time there is a problem that I face in life, I try and remember that, not very successfully, but I try and remember that there has been a time when Swami made words disappear from a cassette tape to ensure that someone could get to speak. And it just goes to show, right? Because I had practiced Om Shri Sai Ram, the Jai Sai Ram, all of that was practiced each 45 minutes each. So I guess Swami wanted to make sure that it was held and heard live in Kulwant Hall. As an adult, after I've grown up, I have, again, because of my obsession with dramas, I've been a part of a few productions that have gone up in front of Swami, and then the experience is totally different, right? It's about having a vision when you start, knowing that this is how the drama is going to be, and then realizing that things happen through you. You have an audacious goal, and then somehow Swami materializes everything, the music that's necessary, the costumes, the actors, everything, and he brings it alive. And that has been that experience of doing that is just, it's just so wonderful, because you realize that you're actually only an instrument. I've never felt that as keenly as I do every time I'm a part of a drama offering before Swami. You're only an instrument and he's working through you. And I think now, when I look back at my childhood goal of being able to tell Swami that, Swami, you are the director of this drama, maybe what he's expecting of me is that I take away this learning from putting up dramas to my life and realize that it is happening through me. I just need to let him perform my life through me. If I'm able to be a flute and surrender, then things will happen. And so he is going to be the director of my life, not just the dramas that I put up before him. Make music through me. I want to be your flute. Make music through me.
Krishna. The very word is suffused with charm, beauty and attraction. In fact, the very name Krishna stands for Akarshayati iti Krishna. And the way he hooks a soul in his charm is something only he can do. In fact, a very beautiful observation that I learned from one of my elders is that the word Krishna under K in the Devanagari script, there is this Ru, which is in the form of a hook. They say that hook is basically to hook the devotees and remove them from the Bhavasagara, or the ocean of life. No one can explain the beauty of the Krishna Tattva better than Swami himself. I would just like to quote one poem that Swami had written and try to translate. Definitely I cannot explain, but try to translate what it means to us, what that enigmatic enchanter can do to our lives. The poem goes thus. Prema leni marubhumalalo Premankuramulu Pemponda Prema Vesamuto Prema Sudhavar Samvar Simpaga Prema Nadulu Pravahimpaga Krishna Ganamu Seyyakade Murali Ganamu Seyyakade. In the beginning, our hearts are parched, are like a desert devoid of love. But when we make ourselves available to him, Prema leni marubhumulalo Premankuramulu Pemponda means he would ensure that the land is rendered fertile. And then small saplings emerge and finally come the blossoms. And then the streams start flowing and the birds start chirping, and there in that heaven called Vrindavan, he comes, resides and plays his melodious flute. In some sense, it's a beautiful journey of transformation. And the very essence of Krishna Tattva is that journey of transformation when we get attracted to Him. In fact, when we make ourselves available to Him. His love is so enigmatic that I'll just quote one beautiful experience from the Mahabharata that Swami had narrated. That was the time when Bhishma, the grandsire of the Kauravas and the Pandavas, and who was fighting for the Kauravas, had taken a vow because of constant pecking of Duryodhana that he would end the war the next day by killing the Pandavas. That was the vow he had taken. And Bhishma being Bhishma, everyone knew what his word meant. Now, how to find a solution to this? Because everyone knew that deep within Bhishma favored the Pandavas because of their adherence to truth and, more importantly, to Krishna himself. Krishna appeared there and gave a wonderful solution. He asked Draupadi that evening to go and visit Bhishma with the veil over our head and fall at his feet. Now, the solution is a brilliant strategy. That's a different part. But when Draupadi went in the presence of Bhishma, the great grandsire, Krishna noticed that she was wearing her footwear. And if one heard the sound of that footwear, or if one knew what that footwear was, in fact, those days, one could easily make out that when a queen walks in by the sound of her footsteps. Krishna immediately asked her to remove the footwear, and he held them, wrapped them with his uttarya and held it in his hands. And when Swami would narrate this, that love, one can see that overpowering love, that Lord who measured the entire cosmos in 3 footsteps, the one whose glory even Brahma and Devi Sharada cannot comprehend, that Lord, he comes down to the level of holding the footwear of its devotee because he wants him to get benefited or her to get benefited. And that is when Draupadi goes and falls at Bhishma's feet, and Bhishma was unaware because he couldn't hear the footsteps, and unknowingly he blesses her, Dirgha Sumangali Bhava, means may you live a happy married life forever. And after she got that boon from him, she revealed herself. And that is when Bhishma was all tears, and he says, I can understand. This is nothing but a strategy of Krishna. Because just today, he had taken a vow to eliminate all the Pandavas on the next day of war. And now that I have given you this boon, he has ensured that there is a conflict and I am rendered mute. That is his love. The Bhagavata Vahini is that story, as beautifully put by Sister Vaishnavi. It's that beautiful story which leads to our transformation with a small prayer, whatever prayer we might have. It might be a beautiful small prayer like, Swami, I want to perform in front of you, or direct a drama. But through that opportunity, he enters our heart to transform us. And that transformation, that is the essence of Krishna Tattva.
ప్రేమ స్వరూపులారా,
embodiments of love.
మీరు అన్ని పలుకులు నిజమైనటువంటివి.
What all you said is quite
కానీ
true.
పలుకులకు సంతోషించడు భగవంతుడు.
God will not be happy
ఆ
by your
పలుకులను
word.
ప్రాక్టికల్ లో పెట్టండి.
All our words must be translated into
న్యూ
action.
ప్లాట్ఫామ్ స్పీచెస్ లో గొప్ప హీరోగా ఉండవచ్చును.
You may be a hero on a platform.
కానీ ప్రాక్టికల్ సైన్స్ లో జీరోగా ఉండవచ్చు.
In practical life, you may be a zero.
ప్రాక్టికల్ సైన్స్ లో హీరో కావాలి.
You should be a hero in practical life.
అది నాకు చాలా ఇష్టము.
That's what Bhagavan expects
ఎన్ని
and
బాధలైనా
wants.
రాని,
Let him any
ప్రాక్టికల్ లోపల నిత్య జీవితం లోపల నీవు హీరోగా.
Any difficulty you may have in practical life, be a hero.
కనుకనే దైవత్వం అనేటువంటిది పెద్దలంతా ఎన్నో అనుభవించినారు.
Divinity is experienced by elders.
మహమ్మద్ కానీ,
Prophet Muhammad,
కానీ జితన కానీ,
Jesus,
ఈ వీరందరూ కూడా ఎంతనో గొప్పవారంతా.
All are very great people.
వారు ఎంత గ్రేట్నెస్ ఎట్లా వచ్చింది?
Where does the secret of
వారు
greatness
మంచి
lie?
పనులు చేయటం చేతనే గ్రేట్నెస్ వచ్చింది.
Their goodness brought them the greatness.
ఈ గ్రేట్నెస్ లో దాంట్లో గుడ్నెస్ కూడా చేర్చాలి.
The greatness should have in combination the goodness too.
కనుక గ్రేట్నెస్ కంటే గుడ్నెస్ చాలా మంచిది.
Goodness is greater than greatness.
ఎంతమందో భారతదేశం నందు మహనీయులంతా ఉన్నారు.
In Bharat there are many noble souls.
ఎంతో ప్రేమతో పవిత్రమైనటువంటి భావంతో మీరు సత్యసాయి పేరు పెట్టుకొని ఎంతో పవిత్రమైన కార్యములు చేస్తున్నారు. కార్యములు చేస్తున్నారే కానీ క్రమక్రమేణా బుద్ధులు మాత్రం దుర్బుద్ధులుగా మారిపోతున్నాయి.
In the name of Sathya Sai, with all the love and sanctity behind, you do lots of work, but yet the thought and the deeds
ప్రధానం కాదు, గుణములు చాలా ప్రధానం.
Bhagavan does not consider the work valid.
ఎక్కడైనా
quality is important.
అడవుల యందున్నా, ఆకాశమున ఉన్నా, పల్లెమున్న, పట్టణమున్న, ఎక్కడ ఉన్నప్పటికీ గుణములు చాలా అవసరం కావాలి.
You may be on earth or in the sky, in the space, up the mountain, down deep in the valley or in the deep sea. You should have values.
అసూయ భావము చాలా చెడ్డది.
Jealousy is very bad.
ఆ అసూయ ఉన్నటువంటి వారికి ఏనాటికి నీ జీవితంగా జరగదు.
A jealous person would never be
అది
successful.
లివింగ్ డెత్ అని చెప్పవచ్చు.
Jealousy leads to living death.
దానికి తగినట్టుగా ఇక్కడ మాటలు అక్కడ మాటలు ఈ తంటాలు చెప్పుకోవటం.
Further adding to this we find carrying
ఇతరులపై
tales.
నీకు ఎందుకు ఈ మాటలు?
Why do you carry
ఇతరుల
tales?
గురించి నీవు ఎందుకు దూషించటము?
Why do you criticize others?
నీలో ఉన్నటువంటి దుర్గుణాలను నీవు దూషించుకో.
Just accuse all the bad
నీలో
qualities
ఉన్నటువంటి
within you.
దుర్భావములను నీవు దూసి పారవేయి.
Brush aside all the bad feelings in you.
కానీ పరుల యందు లేనటువంటి దుర్గుణాన్ని నీవు పుట్టించి ఎందుకు నీవు ప్రచారం చేస్తావు?
But you attribute bad qualities to others and publish.
కొంతమంది ఎన్ని విధములుగా చెప్పినప్పటికీ వారిలో మార్పు చెందటం లేదు.
In spite of repeated caution, there is no change in many.
ఇప్పుడు 5-6 సంవత్సరం నుంచి కూడాను నాకు చాలా బేజారుగా ఉంటుంటది.
Bhagavan is very much vexed for
ఇలాంటి
last 5-6
సంస్థలు
years.
ప్రయత్నించి ప్రారంభించి ప్రయోజనం ఏమిటి?
What is the use of these institutions and organizations?
సమితిలంతా పెట్టుకుంటున్నారు,
We have samitis,
భజన మండలిలు పెట్టుకుంటున్నారు,
bhajana mandalis.
సోషల్ వర్క్ అంతా చేస్తున్నారు,
We do social work
స్టడీ వర్క్ జరుపుతున్నారు,
and we find
జరుపుతున్నారు పనులు. ఏం ప్రయోజనము?
so much work is going on. Why?
హృదయంలో ప్రేమతత్వమే లేకపోతే ఎన్ని జరిపి కూడా ప్రయోజనం లేదు.
Without love in our heart, transformation,
లవ్
all
ఈజ్
the work
గాడ్,
is useless.
లివ్ ఇన్ లవ్.
Love is God, live in love.
ఆ ప్రేమతత్వాన్ని మీరు పెంచుకోవాలి.
Develop the spirit of love.
కనుకనే ఊరికి వారిపైన వీరిపైన ద్వేషాలు పెట్టుకోవటము,
And hatred against each
ఈ
other.
టీచర్స్ లోపల కూడాను ద్వేషాలు,
And there's hatred among teachers.
ఈ టీచర్స్ లో కూడాను పార్టీలు,
There's infighting, groupism among
ఇలాంటి
teachers.
దుర్బుద్ధులు ఉన్నటువంటి వారిని కాల్చివేసినా కానీ తప్పులేదు.
Such bad people with the kind of contradiction
వారి
among
నుంచి ఇతరులు
themselves
దుర్గుణములు
are not worth the salt.
ఇలాంటి దుర్గుణములు ఉండేటువంటి వారు నేనేమాత్రమో చూడను.
Bhagavan will never consider those people with these bad
నేను
qualities.
ఏమి కావాల్సినా నేను ఇస్తాను,
Bhagavan is ready to
నా
give.
ప్రాణం కావాల్సింటే ఇస్తాను, కానీ దుర్గుణాన్ని దూరం చేసుకోండి.
Bhagavan is ready to give his life for you, but give up the bad qualities.
కనుకనే సత్యసాయి అనేటువంటి పేరుకు తగినటువంటి గౌరవాన్ని ఇవ్వాలి.
We should respect the organization
ఎన్నో
befitting
సంస్థలు
the
ఈ
holy
రకంగా
matchless
జరుగుతున్నాయి.
name.
ఎన్నో సంస్థలు ఈ రకంగా జరుగుతున్నాయి.
There are many organizations in the world.
ఏ సంస్థలు అయినా కానీ స్వామి పేరు పెట్టుకున్నప్పుడు సత్య అన్న సత్య మార్గంలో పోవాలి.
The organization bearing the matchless holy name of Sathya should follow the path of truth.
ఈ సత్యన సాయి అని పేరు పెట్టుకొని సత్యాన్ని పలకపోతే ప్రయోజనం ఏంటి?
With the name of Sathya Sai, if we don't speak truth, what for is the name?
నోరెత్తితే అబద్ధము,
By the time we speak,
కాలు
it's full of
పెడితే
lies.
అధర్మము,
And all our actions are unrighteous.
మొహం తిప్పితే ప్రేమనే ఉండదు.
And our face does not show any love.
కనుకనే మనము ఆ సత్య ధర్మాన్ని ప్రేమతో మనం పెంచుకున్నప్పుడే ఆ సంస్థలు కూడాను బాగా పెరుగుతాయి.
Therefore, when we develop truth and righteousness on the foundation of
మొట్టమొదటి
love,
మీరు
the organization
ఈనాటి
will
నుండి
grow.
కూడాను ప్రేమతత్వాన్ని,
Today, this principle of love
సత్య మార్గాన్ని,
and the path of truth
ధర్మతత్వాన్ని
and also righteousness,
అభివృద్ధి పరచుకోవాలి.
we have got to develop them.
అదే మీరు చేయవలసినటువంటి పని.
That's what we are supposed to do.
Sairam. Swami often says that he is always around us, above us, behind us, below us, and in us. And I have actually felt that that is very true. It's not just a statement that he makes. And just like the eyelid protects the eye, I have felt his protection in my life. And I would like to share an experience that I had way back when I was expecting my third child. So what happens is one day I have a dream, and I'm seated in my home in front of Swami's picture, and the garland from his picture falls on my head. So when I woke up, I knew that it was a blessing, and true enough, within a few days, my pregnancy of my third child was confirmed. Now, about a month into my pregnancy, I have a second dream, and in this dream, I'm in Parthi, and someone is asking me for Swami's Paduka to do Paduka Puja, and I start looking for it. And in this dream, I see Lord Ganesha's picture, who is my favorite deity. And he comes alive, meaning to say that his eyes, his ears, his hands, his trunk start moving. So when I woke up, I shared this dream with my family, and we knew that it was a divine instruction to conduct Paduka Puja at home, and we do Paduka Puja at home. Now, a little further into my pregnancy, I have a third dream, and in this dream, Swami is present. And so what happens is, my mom is carrying two baby boys in her hands like this, and she's bringing them up to Swami. And Swami is looking at the babies. So I wake up, and I wondered whether I was expecting twins. And then I also knew that I was going to have a baby boy, because that was what was shown in the dream. So true enough, when the scan was done, it was confirmed that I was expecting a baby boy, but it wasn't twins. So I didn't quite make sense of why two baby boys were shown, but I didn't think too much of that. Now I have a smooth pregnancy, and I passed my due date. And the gynecologist tells me that if I don't get into labor within the week, I need to admit myself on a Sunday. So I remember it was a Friday. I come back home after work, and we do our weekly family bhajans. I get to do arati, and I have my dinner, and soon after that, I get my first signs of labor. So I'm admitted into the hospital. Everything goes on fine until early morning, where I couldn't bear the labor pain anymore. So I started asking for epidural. Okay, epidural is a jab that is given to relieve the pain. So now I had to wait for nearly an hour plus before the anesthetician turns up. So she comes, she gives me the jab, and the next thing I know is that my baby's heartbeat has started dipping. So it was code red emergency, and several doctors run into the delivery ward, and they were talking to my husband. Okay, before I knew it, all the nurses were practically wheeling me into the operation theatre for cesarean section. So surgery is done, and I wake up, and I dare not ask anyone what happened to my baby, because the last thing I knew was that his heartbeat was dipping. So I was psychologically preparing myself for the worst case scenario. So this went on for an hour plus until the nurse tells me that my baby is fine. So I'm relieved. So what actually happened was that because he was an overdue baby, he had passed on meconium while I was in labor, and he actually swallowed that, and that caused his heartbeat to dip. So they flushed out the meconium, and he was in a special ward for nearly 2 to 3 days. Right now, I get discharged from the hospital. I come back home, and I enter into postnatal depression, which is very common amongst women who have just delivered. Now, so I kept asking, why did this happen to me? You know, I had all the blessings through the dreams. I had delivered 2 children through normal delivery, and I had such a smooth pregnancy. So why did this have to happen to me? And recovery from surgery is much more painful and much more slower as opposed to normal delivery. And in the early weeks, I was in so much of pain, I couldn't even get off from bed. So every time I needed to get off from bed, I had to slide down the bed. So I kept asking, why is this happening to me, Swami? You know, I was in denial. Now, about a year later, I bump into this ex-colleague of mine, and she shares with me about her sister who had also gone through a C-section. And then she tells me that her sister wasn't so lucky. She had bled profusely after surgery, and she died from that. So only then I realized so many things could have gone wrong during my surgery, but Swami protected me and my child, and I was very grateful to him. Now, as my son was growing up, the first word that he uttered was the word Baba. And we all know that this is not something common that any child utters, because the first word that any child utters is Amma or mother. But in my son's case, he kept saying Baba, Baba, Baba for several weeks before he actually started saying Amma. And I knew that this was another indication from Swami that he had something to do with this child's birth. Now, 8 years down the road, I have another dream, and in this dream, Swami comes, and after a short conversation, he tells me, I'm going to give you something, and he shows me with his hands like this. And soon after that, we have a puppy introduced into the family as our fourth child. Now, a little later, we consult an astrologer who tells me that based on my horoscope, I'm supposed to have 4 kids. Now, I tell him that's not possible because based on my, I only have 3 kids. And he says, no, based on your horoscope, you have 4. Now, a second astrologer whom we consult confirms the same. Only then it struck a chord and I made sense of the dream that I had way back when I was expecting my third child, and where in this dream my mom is showing 2 baby boys to Swami. So my own interpretation of the dream was that perhaps I was supposed to have twins and perhaps one of them was not to be alive, but Swami through his own immense grace had averted that mishap and spared me from the pain. And whatever karma that I was supposed to have gone through, I went through during that 1 hour plus where I was going through this mental torment of thinking what happened to my child. And the prediction of the 4th child was realized through the introduction of a puppy into the family. So this is my own interpretation of the dream. And there are several lessons that I drew from this whole experience. One is always trust in divine timing, because divine timing is perfect timing. While we are in labor, the nurses and doctors are not always there by our bedside. They only come every hour or so to check on us. And only when the anesthetician was around did my baby's heartbeat dip. If his heartbeat had dipped at a time when no one was around, we can't imagine what his fate would have been. So in the same way, in every life situation, we must also trust in divine timing, because as devotees, we often want to have immediate resolution to problems, immediate answers to questions. But we must have the faith in Swami that he will do what is right for us at the right time. The second thing that I learned was that when life unfolds itself in ways which is not according to our wish, we often get upset with Swami, just like I got upset. But we must remember who Swami truly is. He knows our past, our present, our future, and he will do what is best for us. And whatever happens only happens for our good. Now, the last thing I learned was that when everything goes on well in life, we should thank him. When it doesn't, we shouldn't question him and ask him, why Swami, why are you doing this to me? Are you happy that this is happening to me? We shouldn't do that. Instead, we should surrender to him and tell him, Swami, you know what is happening in my life. You take care and you take charge. And you help me right through this. And I think what's most important is to also know what are the lessons that he is trying to teach us from that experience. Having that in mind will help us to ride through the whole thing. So these were some things that I learned. Sai Ram.
Divine Mother and the love of the Divine Mother. The Lalita Sahasranam very beautifully describes that glorious effulgence and that nature of that Supreme Mother as Shri Mata, Shri Maharagini, Srimat Simhasineshwari. In fact, it's very difficult to literally translate those words into English, but it just brings about an overpowering sense of submission when one chants that particular line. Beautiful experience of Sister Vijaya. The way Swami takes care, the minutest of details, just as a mother would, with that infinite love, the Prema Vahini, that incessant infinite love. I was a witness to one such beautiful saga of love. There was a classmate of mine, for reasons that will be known in short duration, I cannot take his name, but he hailed from a hilly region, the north of India, and his father was a pujari, a priest in a local temple. Of course, being a pujari is not a very lucrative job in a very physical sense, but I'm sure the divine was touched. he never knew much about Swami except for the fact that yes, there is a person wearing ochre robe and an afro haircut. There was a local samiti there in his place, and people knew him, and some of the people in the samiti knew the predicament of this family, and they approached the father and told him about the Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning. Now his son, who later, like, we both became classmates and it is his story, he had no clue about this place. So it's a place which gives free education. See, of the various things that he uses to draw us close to him, this is one. And he took this opportunity, filled the form, sent it across, and he got a call letter for the entrance. He comes, he writes, he clears all the rounds, and he is a student in the Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning. That year, later in that year, in fact, it's the next calendar year, but that very same academic year, in the month of January, when the sports meet preparation was going on, this boy was a part of a very daredevilry kind of an act known as the Celestial Rhythm. It was a program wherein one performed aerial acrobats at 40 feet from the ground. And that requires tremendous stamina, tremendous, strength of mind, a lot of dedication, a lot of focus. And he was a part of those 16 to 18 boys who was there on the grid performing that celestial act. Just to give a background of his family, as I told, his father was a priest in the local temple. He had a sister. And one of the things that typically a brother would worry is about the marriage of his sister, because he knows the condition of the family. And with that fervent prayer, he held a little letter in his hand. And as Swami came for the evening darshan, he looked at him and he called him. He opened that letter and he looked at this boy and started telling, "Your father is a pujari. There is a sister at home and you are worried about her marriage. I will take care. I will do everything for you. Don't worry." And saying so, Swami materialized a beautiful chain which contained the small idol of Ganesha embedded in a crystal sort of. And Swami put it around his neck, and as if it was like, Lord Ganesha is known as the destroyer or remover of obstacles. It was as if a very subtle, at the same time, a very beautiful indication from the Lord that henceforth I'll see to it that all obstacles from your life are removed. That 15 minutes changed his life. Not that it was not changed before, but when you interact physically with that form, that is when you understand a lot of things and you try to correlate a lot of things. Today he is one of the most distinguished military personnel. I cannot go into more details. But just imagine a boy from a rural hilly region who's literally worried about the financial whereabouts of his family. From that point to this day, where he is an absolute distinguished personnel, serving in one of the most prestigious ways, rendering service to his nation, the transformation that Swami brought about in his life, what a lovely way, exactly the way a mother would do. And I'm sure each one of us has had those wonderful, innumerable such experiences. This was just something to add on to that Prema Vahini, that incessant flow of love of Swami.
ప్రేమ స్వరూపులారా,
Embodiments of love.
దైవాన్ని నమ్మితే ఒక్క మాట పైన చెప్పిన అన్ని మాటల పైన దాన్ని నమ్మాలి.
We should follow God in total faith in whatever He says.
నీకు ఇష్టమైనటువంటి దానిపైన నమ్మకము, ఇష్టం లేని దానిపైన నమ్మకం లేకుండా పోవటము, అది సరైనటువంటి ఒక విశ్వాసం కాదు.
You have faith if you like that, and you have no faith if you dislike it. It's not proper.
ఎస్ అను వారికి ఎస్ అనురా,
God says yes to those that say
నో అను
yes.
వారికి నో అనురా.
If you say no, God says no.
నో ఎస్సులు నీ నోటికి గాని సాయికి సర్వం ఎస్ ఎస్ ఎస్.
yes, no belong to you, your declaration, your feeling, but to Sai God, everything is yes.
నాకు అందరూ మంచివారే,
To Bhagavan, all are good.
ఎవరు చెడ్డవారు లేరు.
There are no bad people.
కానీ
But
లౌకికమైన ఈ యొక్క నెగిటివ్ భావాలతో కూడినటువంటి వారికి కొంచెం మంచి చెడ్డలు విచారించుకోకుండా పోతే వాడి జీవితమే నాశనం చేసుకుంటారు.
But from the worldly point of view, if you are not cautious of the negative behavior, you will be spoiling your life.
కనుకనే మీకు కొన్ని చెప్పవలసి వస్తుంది.
So Bhagavan had to teach you these things.
నాకు అందరూ ప్రీతియే,
Bhagavan likes all.
నేను అందరినీ ప్రేమిస్తాను.
Swami loves all.
కానీ కొన్ని ఇలాంటి సందిగ్ధ అవస్థలు ఎందు మాత్రం వారికి నిశ్చ చెప్పాలి.
But when we are confused, Bhagavan should choose to teach us.
లేకపోతే మీ జీవితానికి చాలా ప్రమాదం ఏర్పడుతుంది.
Or else you will be put to danger in your life.
కనుక ఎవరెవరి డౌట్స్ వాళ్ళలో ఉండవచ్చును.
You may have doubts.
డౌట్స్ లేకుండా ఏ మానవుడు ఉండడానికి వీలు కాదు.
No man can live without doubts.
కాబట్టి ఆ డౌట్స్కి మీరు చోటు ఇవ్వద్దండి.
So don't give scope for any doubt.
అది ఉండినంత వరకు కూడా నిన్ను అనేక విధముల అశాంతికి గురి వచ్చేస్తుంది.
The doubt in you will make you restless, agitated.
ప్రేమను మీరు పెంచుకోండి.
Develop love.
ప్రేమ మీ హృదయం నిండుకు పెంచుకున్నప్పుడే
When there is love in your
సర్వము
heart,
ప్రేమమయమే.
everything will be full of love.
ఆ ప్రేమముని దగ్గర ద్వేషం అనేది ఉండదు.
Where there is love, there is no
కనుక
hate.
మొట్టమొదటి విశ్వాసాన్ని పెంచుకోండి.
So first, we should cultivate faith.
ఆ విశ్వాసమే లేకున్నప్పుడు ఎంత ఉండి ఏం ప్రయోజనం?
Without this faith, what for is the human life?
అందరినీ నమ్ము, తప్పు లేదు.
There's nothing wrong if you believe
కానీ
everybody.
దైవభావంతో నీవు విశ్వసించు.
But have faith with the divine prompting.
ఆ దైవభావంతో విశ్వసించినప్పుడు సర్వము నీకు దైవత్వంగానే కనిపిస్తుంది.
With the spiritual promptings, everything would be divine.
ప్రియమైన విద్యార్థులారా,
Students,
ముఖ్యంగా మీరు ప్రేమని మీరు అభివృద్ధి పరచుకోండి.
most importantly, develop love.
ఏది మీరు చేసుకోవడానికి వీలు లేకపోయినా ప్రేమ సులభంగా చిక్కేటువంటిది మీకు.
You may not be able to achieve anything, it's easy to love.
చైతన్యుడు చెప్పినట్టుగా,
As Chaitanya said,
నీ స్వర్గమో నా కైలాసమో నాకు అక్కర్లేదు,
I am not bothered of your heaven and paradise.
నీ వైకుంఠమో నీ ఇదే నాకు అక్కర్లేదు,
I'm not bothered of your Vaikuntha.
నాకు కావాల్సింది ప్రేమ రాజ్యమే.
What I want is this love.
కనుక నీ ప్రేమ సామ్రాజ్యంలో నాకు ఒక చోటు ఇచ్చేయి.
Give me a place in this kingdom of love.
అది ఒక్కటి నాకు చాలు.
That is enough
అది
for me.
ఒక్కటి ఉన్న సర్వము అక్కడ నాకు సిద్ధిస్తుంది.
With that gives me fulfillment.
ప్రేమతో సాధించలేనటువంటిది లోకంలో ఒక్కటి కూడా లేదు.
There's nothing that you cannot achieve in this world without love.
Sayam everyone. I got into Swami's fold slightly later than most of you would have, and I thank my wife who was very instrumental in me being closer to Swami. I recollect my first interaction at the Sai Center was 7 or 8 years ago when I had come to pick my wife who had come here to attend a bhajan. I didn't even get into the center. I was waiting outside the main gate. I saw the banner. That was the very first instance of me knowing the logo of our center, which was Love All Serve All. I had known about Baba, but I never had the chance to go through I was never exposed to the literature or never had never had the privilege to know more about Swami's teaching. It's only when after I had like more of an interactive session with Brother Sri Ram, who explained to me the activities of the center, that's when I got closer to Swami. I still remember the first time when I came to our center, it was purely a thought of doing some voluntary work. So Brother Sri Ram was very actively and energetically explaining to us his project of helping the helpers, where we were trying to help the domestic workers in Singapore with some English and life skills. So he was very passionate about it, and the way he explained to me about the project actually got my interest into the project, and I offered him instantly to help him with the logistics and the back-end support, whatever was needed. That was the first experience for me to get into Swami's fold. I didn't realize an activity as small as that would have an impact of such a great magnitude, both from a beneficiary perspective and also the amount of people who put in their tireless effort into making that program a successful program. Thus, kind of kind of confirming Swami's motto of love also. You have people cooking food for almost 300 of them every Sunday. The logistics arrangement which we used to make to get that food into the center was also humongous. The number of students who would come to the center to get benefited with the English, we started off with a small number which was around 40, but as of last term we have more than 250 registrations, and we are still going strong. This was all pre-COVID, and we are very optimistic once the world it becomes a better world, we would be able to continue that seva for the foreseeable future. The other thing which I would like to also share was, while we were planning the logistics, we used to come to the basement. Everything was arranged in the basement. So while we were arranging for the food at the basement, that's when I actually got first-hand interaction with Swami's devotees, who would have sessions at the basement talking about the values of Swami, teachings of Swami. That's when it was more of a passive hearing which got me into this, and I took very active interest in Swami's teaching. I used to hear a lot of satsangs which was available online. I had special mention for Brother Arvind Balasubramania, whose YouTube videos kind of inspired me. I kind of took that as like one of my biggest de-stressing opportunity, in that sense, where if at all I had any issue at work, and I had a lot of issues at work at that time, and I used to just lean on those satsang to kind of and I still believe that it was only Swami's blessings which helped me to navigate out of that situation what we had. We also the other thing which I like about our Samiti of society is the selfless love which people show, and how people come together for one single objective, which is seva. It is an embodiment of Swami's preaching, which is more of love all, serve all, which is actually kind of magnified and demonstrated at the center when we do any activity, and that's which keeps me into this organization. At the same time, I had very recently, as in 2019, I had the opportunity to go to Bhatti. I've been hearing from my wife about the aura, the vibes you get from Bhatti, but I never had the luxury to experience that when Swami's physical presence was around. But when I went there, I actually was completely amazed and completely mesmerized by the aura there, which kind of helped, which kind of motivated me to know more about Swami's learnings and preachings, and that's when I started picking up the habit of reading Swami's literature. It is still a work in progress. I would not say I have learned a lot. I've started with a Sai Society to start with, and I'm right now going through various literature of Swami, which is helping me to grow as a better person. I think the Sandeep of now compared to Sandeep of before, the biggest difference is I was only focused on work, and as part of my work, I thought, okay, helping others is part of my work. What has changed now is this helping coming into Swami's fold has helped me get that direction to do seva and see how I can get that principle of seva coming back to my work. So what I've also done in the course of my journey professionally is whatever learnings I could invite from Swami's teaching or my experience from the center, I could actually use some of those learnings back at work, especially when it comes to CSR initiatives or when it comes to seva activities which we get at work. I've successfully managed to pilot a couple of projects which I got the idea during my experience at the center, and I thought, why can't we scale up that to benefit far more who are outside the purview of the center?
Sai Ram. A beautiful experience indeed. In fact, a string of experiences from Brother Sandeep. The most beautiful part of that is how much Swami appreciates or how much he likes the concept of service, how much he likes service. In fact, if you see the name of the organization, Sri Sathya Sai Seva Organization, it's primarily with service as its focus, a service organization or service-based organization. A small but beautiful experience. It was one of those days when Swami would literally ask us to perform a lot of programs in his presence in that little corridor. We used to call them the corridor dramas, wherein Swami would walk right in between the steps and the place where students sit in that white patch. We don't know, the third block. In one of those dramas, or in one of those programs, there was a very, very small scene, barely a few minutes. In fact, the whole program was around half an hour to 40 minutes, but this particular scene was hardly half a minute scene. And what was that scene? That scene was of a king who was extremely thirsty. And he's like wandering in search of water and he's extremely thirsty. And that depiction was hardly for a few seconds. Not many dialogues, in fact none at all if I remember. And the whole program got over and there were these lead characters and this and that. But at the end of the program, Swami called that boy who played the role of the king and materialized a ring for him. Now, for the people who are the onlookers, in some sense, the audience, who see what is only depicted on the stage, who can only relate with the performance, it looked absolutely out of sync. They couldn't understand why. But that is the beauty, that the Lord is the indweller of our hearts. And He is Bhavapriya. Being the indweller, He knows what is the feeling with which an act is done. After Bhagwan left for his residence after that day's darshan in the evening and the program got over, this boy was in tears. And that is when the whole thing became clear, that for that 10-second scene, he didn't drink a drop of water for the last 24 hours because he really wanted to feel thirsty. He wanted to act as if he was really thirsty. And just to get that proper feeling, he didn't drink water for an entire day. What touched Swami was that dedication to his act, that dedication to his service. And that is what pleases him. At the end of the day, just like any other physical act, service is also an act. But what Swami has always been emphasizing is that God is not merely interested in your external exhibition or the external act, but He is more concerned about the feeling with which the act is done. And this is a beautiful example. In fact, this thought came to my mind as we were listening to the wonderful experiences of Brother Sandeep, and I'm sure we will take those lessons in our life as to how to serve Him.
అన్నింటికి మనకు ప్రధానమైనటువంటిది సేవనే.
Of all, most important thing is service.
ఇట్టి సేవను మనం మరచి రాబోయేటువంటి యొక్క భవిష్యత్తు గురించి విచారిస్తూ గడిచిపోయినటువంటి దానిని గురించి వగస్తూ కాలాన్ని వ్యర్థం చేస్తున్నాము.
We have forgotten our bounden duty of rendering service in the community. We go on worrying of the future and brood over the past.
కనుక ప్రేమ స్వరూపులారా,
Embodiments of love.
మనము నిరంతరం కూడాను సేవల కంటే మించినటువంటిది సాధన మరొకటి లేదు.
We have to recognize there is no other spiritual practice which is more than that of service.
శ్రవణం, కీర్తనం, విష్ణు స్మరణం, పాదసేవనం, వందనం, అర్చనం, దాస్నేహం, ఆత్మనివేదనం, ఇది అని మనం భావించుకొని ఇట్టి సేవలను మనం మునిగిపోతున్నాము.
We spend our time thinking of the 9 paths of devotion, like singing, listening, worship, salutation, surrender, and so on.
కనుక మనకు నిత్య సత్యమైనటువంటిది సేవ యొక్క ఫలితమే ప్రధానమైనటువంటిది.
The consequence and the results of our eternal service is most important to be kept in view.
ఆది పురుషులు ఇట్టి సేవల చేతనే ధన్యులైపోయారు.
In fact, that is the cause for our liberation and redemption right from the beginning.
మనం నిరంతరం కూడా పరులకు సేవ చేస్తూ రావాలి.
We have to offer incessant services to everybody.
అందు నిమిత్తమే ఈ కాయమును భగవంతుడు అనుగ్రహించాడు.
For that purpose this body is gifted.
ఈ దేహము కేవలం తిని త్రాగి కాలమును వ్యక్తం చేసే నిమిత్తమే కాదు.
The body is gifted not to merely spend time in food, raiment, shelter, drinking and eating alone.
కనుక ఈ దేహమును పరులకు సహజీవులకు సాధన చేసే నిమిత్తమై అందించినాడనే సత్యాన్ని గుర్తించాలి.
We have to recognize the basic fact that God has given us this body to serve the neighborhood, everybody in society.
కనుకనే ప్రతి మానవుడు కూడా సేవలో పాల్గొనాలి.
Hence everyone must participate in service.
సేవ కంటే మించినటువంటి ఫలితం మరొకటి లేదు.
There is no other thing that is greater than service.
మహాపురుషులందరూ కూడాను సేవ ద్వారానే ధన్యులవుతూ వచ్చారు.
All noble souls had their lives realized, redeemed, liberated through service only.
కనుక సేవల్లో మీరు ప్రయత్నం చేయండి.
Therefore participate, involve in service activity.
భజన సాధనల కంటే కూడాను ఈ సేవలే చాలా ప్రధానమైనటువంటిది.
Of all kinds of spiritual practices, this service is noblest and the highest.
ప్రేమ స్వరూపులారా,
Embodiments of love.
సేవ అంటే ఏమనుకుంటున్నారు మీరు?
What is that you think about service?
ఏదో పరులకు కష్టాల సమయం లోపల తోడ్పడటము, వారికి సహాయం చేయటము, వారి సేవల్లో పాల్గొనటము, ఇది ఏ సేవలుగా భావిస్తున్నారు?
You consider that the service meant to be of some support to the poor and the needy at the time of hour.
కాదు కాదు.
No.
మన దేహం నిరంతరం కూడాను సేవలు ఎందే దీన్ని అంకితం గావించాలి.
The body must be dedicated to service.
భగవంతునకు సేవలు ఎందే ఆనందం కానీ, పూజలు ఎందుకు కానీ, త్యాగములు ఎందుకు కానీ ఆనందం లేదు.
In fact, God is very happy watching your services and not other forms of worship.
కనుక సర్వీస్ మనం చేయండి.
So we should serve.
ది బెస్ట్ వే టు లవ్ గాడ్ ఈజ్ టు లవ్ ఆల్, సర్వ్ ఆల్.
The best way to God is to love all and serve all.
ఈ రెండింటినీ మనం చక్కగా గుర్తించుకొని వర్తించితే ఇంతకంటే గొప్ప సాధన మరొకటి లేదు.
If we recognize these twin principles, there is no other greater spiritual path.
Sai Ram, whenever I look back in my life, I'm always reminded of this quote by Steve Jobs. And if I may paraphrase, it goes like, you cannot always connect dots looking forward, but you can always connect the dots looking backwards. And at the same time, trust that in the future, the dots will eventually connect. So now when I look back at my life and my journey with Swami, the dots miraculously connect. So probably when I look back at my life, I may relate it to like a stage play, where maybe I can probably segregate it as 3 phases, where of that stage play, where the first stage, I may say, Swami was backstage and orchestrating my life or the play, if you may say. And the second phase, where he chose to come on stage and be part of that life that I was leading. And now is the third phase, where after Mahasamadhi, where again Swami chose to go backstage and continue. So to begin with my first stage of my life. So for me, relating to Swami is mostly through dreams. And the very first dream that I had of Bhagwan was when I was an 8-year-old back in Hyderabad, and I remember I had this dream where I saw both Shirdi Baba and Swami at the same time. So I remember I wake up all excited, I go up to my mother and my grandmother and I tell her, through my left eye I saw Shirdi Sai Baba, and through my right eye I saw Swami, meaning to say they both appeared together. So that's how I explained as a kid. So that said, the dream ends, and the childhood, as a family, we had to go through a difficult time. And over a period of, over that period, my mother fell ill, and later, after a long battle with the illness, she passed away due to the illness. So at that point in time, personally for me and my brother, we felt the world has crashed around us and there was no way to go, and we were at crossroads, even to a fact that we were not knowing what would happen tomorrow. At such point in time, when you feel all the doors are closed, that's when Bhagwan chooses to enter and shows that there is still one door that is still open. And that's when my uncle and my aunt moved back from the US to take care of me and my brother. And with that, Swami opened floodgates, and that's how he, if I may say, like thrust his presence in our lives. So that's when we enter whatever I mentioned earlier, the stage play, right? So this is the phase 2 where Swami chose to show his presence even more dominantly in our lives. So the first, so it began with a lot of, visiting Parthi or Vrindavans for Swami darshans, attending bhajans, having Sunday home bhajans at home, and so on and so forth. So that set the ball rolling. So later on, the very first, probably if I may say, an instance where we had our first Upanayanam that was conducted in the divine presence of Swami in Vrindavan. I remember going to Vrindavan where they asked all the Vatus or the participants to form a line, go in front of Swami, bow down to him, and take an exit for other formalities. So I remember going, may not be too close to Swami, but it was a good feet away. Bowing down to Swami, that was my first face-to-face with Swami. And the presence was so powerful, yet so calming and so energetic. But yet I couldn't look Swami in the eye because I was nervous. That was my first interaction. And I bow down to Swami, and then I go for other formalities. So the next day the Upanayanam is conducted, and both me and my brother had this wonderful privilege of having having done our Upanayanam in presence of Swami. Having said that, later on, as time went by, and back in the day, I used to watch a lot of movies. So much so that somehow I was binge watching, especially Telugu movies. That's when my aunt cautioned me, saying, Srinath, now that you have come in Swami's presence and we're doing bhajans at home, you should reduce your TV time. But somehow it didn't resonate with me that much. But again, Swami had his own way. So after some time, Swami appears in my dream, and the dream he comes up to me and he tells me, or rather asks me, what is Priyatama? In the dream I was so confident, I tell him, Swami, it's love for girlfriend. Then I was expecting Swami to nod his head, but in fact I see a frown on Swami's face. Then Swami again asks me, what is Priyatama? Then this time I take a pause and I think, but I just twist my statement, but still meaning the same. I say, Swami, love for somebody. Then his frown grew deeper, and I knew it's better to keep silent now. Then Swami again said, what is Priyatama? I didn't answer. He immediately answered saying, love for God, love for God, love for God. So the dream ends, and somehow without being forced, I never felt like I've been forced away from the movies, but somehow the circumstances changed in such a way, or probably aligned in such a way, that bhajans started happening at home. We were busy with seva at the centers, going to darshans and so on, that somehow my mind drifted away from the movies and I was totally into Sai. So everywhere it was Sai, Sai, Sai. That said, again, the time went by. Then it was the crucial time of 12th grade, where back in India it is known that at that year is very crucial, for that sets your career, right? You choose your modules and that sets your career path. And because I was so much into Swami's literature, I was so hooked on to Swami's presence, and I wanted to read so much about Swami. Somehow my grades started affecting because I was unable to focus much on my studies. And I remember there came a time where I had to give entrance exams to get into engineering course. And probably you name any entrance exam under the sun that happens in India, I gave all of them, but no luck in getting through because I was not getting a good grade or a rank, if I may say. So I had only one exam left, without which probably I wouldn't be going into the engineering stream. I had to choose something else. But deep down I was clear that I wanted to do engineering, and my family was supportive of it. So right before that exam, I was still not confident. I thought it would be like any other exam. Probably this would also just go away without me doing well. But that night, again, so Bhagavan chooses to appear in my dream. And in the dream, I see myself in Kulwant Hall, probably late in the evening, it was pitch dark. And I see two students running up to me from Swami's residence. And they tell me, Srinath, Swami asked us to inform you that he'll be there with you during your exam tomorrow. So the dream ends, and I wake up in the morning. Somehow I didn't even realize that I had the dream because I was so nervous about my exam that I had to do well, because it was like final exam that I had to give. And I give my exam, and in the examination hall we are supposed to answer 60 questions for 60 minutes. And as the examiner finally sounded, cautioned, saying that we just have about 10 minutes left, and I realized that I hardly answered 10 questions, or maybe 15. And I had about 45 questions left that needed to be answered in 10 minutes. Then I had no choice. All I did was Om Sai Ram, and I started circling my answers. And the exam ends, and I come back home feeling dejected that I didn't give my best, and probably this exam is gone too. Then the day of the results arrive, and to my utter surprise, I score a good, if not good, I may say a decent rank, and I got into one of the good engineering schools in Karnataka, and that's how Swami set my path towards engineering that I always wished to do. So during that time, in the year 2008, we received a communication from Sri Vinay Kumar, who was at that time the youth president of Karnataka. So Swami asked him to bring about 1,000 youth from Karnataka who could chant Rudram in his divine presence for the following Shivratri in 2009. So as soon as the word came out, several thousand youth from Karnataka signed up for that, and including myself, because I just wanted to be in presence. Anything, doesn't matter if it's difficult or easy, I just wanted to be in Swami's presence. So that's how I signed up, rather nervously, because I had no background in Vedam, let alone Rudram. So that said, we started our rigorous Rudram training, and I still remember those chill winter mornings of Bangalore, where I used to wake up in the morning at 5:30, go to the center, learn Rudram, then go back to college for your regular studies. So this happened for about a period of 8 to 9 months until the next Shivratri. So during that time, we started this Rudram training in the month of August, and in the month of October, Bhagavan again chooses to appear in my dream. And in the dream, I see that I was seated in front of Swami, and my brother was seated to the left of Swami. And he gets up on his knee and he tells, or rather he whispers something in Swami's ear, and Swami gently gives a nod, saying, okay. Then my brother, suddenly, indicates me, saying, come on, chant Rudram, chant Rudram. But I don't, because in my mind, I'm quite angry and upset with my brother, thinking that why did you even inform Swami that I'm learning Rudram? Because I don't even know ABC of Rudram. I just started learning Rudram. So that's how the dream concludes. Fast forward to the month of January, where all of us assembled in Vrindavan for a mock run, where we chanted Rudram, practiced Rudram. Then after that, about a month later, on end of February, we had like buses going from all over Karnataka to Parthi for Shivratri to chant Rudram in Swami's divine presence. That got me excited, because I never expected to last for such long because I thought I would give up in between. I had my own doubts. But yet I was there. I was happy that even if I would be that 1000th person just to be in that presence and chant, I would be grateful. So we reach Parthi, and the following evening, all of us go to darshan. And in the darshan, they somehow segregated us in 2 blocks, and all of a sudden I find myself seated on the very first row between 2 blocks where Swami would pass by in between. So that was in evening darshan. Then this is on the eve of Shivratri. So when Swami comes towards my darshan, I always had this habit of writing letters to Swami. But we were cautioned that, no falling on Swami's feet, no forcing Swami to take your letter. But then yet I chose to write my letter, and I asked one of the volunteers saying, I won't ask Swami to take my letter, but I'll just hold it. In case if he asks for my letter, I'll hand it over to him. So Swami comes for darshan, he passes by me. So as soon as he passes, some of my heart sank because Swami didn't take my letter, and I was almost about to withdraw my letter. Then even as Swami passed by me, he just stretches his left hand out and just picks my letter between his fingers and just goes away. That got me thrilled. Then we go back to our sheds. We had one more mock run because the next day was Shivratri. And Sri Nanjundu Dikshit, who headed the Atirudra Mahayagna, he was going around the hall, seeing who is chanting, how one is chanting, and so on and so forth. At the same time, noting down the numbers that we had on ID batches. So the next day morning, we wake up, all of us wake up at 2:30 a.m. Then by the time we go to the Kulbant hall, it was 4 a.m. in the morning. As we were seated down in Kulbant hall at the back of the hall, then I see this one volunteer who comes up, and now is the time to allocate spaces for the 1,000 youth who have assembled there. So as they start calling our ID numbers, I realized that probably the 10th or the 12th number, I hear that the number that they said was mine. And I was totally, it was totally unbelievable because no way I could be getting that number, because I was checking my ID several times to ensure that it was the right number because I thought I was not hearing it right. But then I got up, and even before I realized, I was seated right up to the stairs where Swami would be seated on the dais. And I find myself seated on the first row. Then the time goes by, and as the hall fills in, then Swami comes out for darshan. So just before Swami was about to arrive, I see this person who comes up with 2 mics and set one mic in front of me and puts the other mic to the other brother who is sitting to the far left of me. So as soon as I see this, I was all the more nervous. I was wondering to myself, is this real? Am I really going to chant in the mic? So I just pushed my mic aside to my neighbor and I request him, brother, could you please chant on the mic? I'm happy doing it without the mic. Then this person comes back running to me, the person who set the mic. He comes back running up to me, and with a stern look he says, no, only you're going to chant on the mic. So I agree, I take the mic, and Swami comes out for darshan, and he completes his darshan round and gets into the interview room. So once he's in the interview room, the Vedam starts right from Ganesha, Atharva Shirsham, and Purusha Suktam, and so on. But this got me all the more nervous because I just learned Rudram, nothing else. And here I was in front of the cameras with the mic in front of me. How am I going to chant? Because I don't know. But yet I didn't want to let Swami down. So all I did was move my lips for the sake of cameras and for the sake of the audience, for who are watching it. So I was fervently praying that Swami, can we start Rudram? Because this is just going on and on except for Rudram. So Swami comes out of the interview room and he gives a signal where everybody then starts with one voice, Om Namo Bhagavate Rudraya. So that just got me started. I gave my full, like 100%. I chanted it at the top of my voice. Swami was seated on the dais for good 2 hours. In fact, it was a mini Atirudram, if I would say, because Swami made us chant 11 times in his divine presence. So after we chanted that, Swami we could see the motherly side of Swami. He was so aware. So as soon as we finished our entire session, he said, with simple hand gesture, he said, meaning to say, have your lunch, go rest, and come back at 3 o'clock. He didn't even talk. All this signaling he did. Then after that, we come back for the evening darshan. I'm again seated in the first row, chanting Rudram. Then we had the Shivratri bhajans that kicked off that night. Then after that, the following morning, again I get the first row to be in front of Swami. This is where I see, like, if Swami wills, even if you're a person who if you're thinking to yourself that if you're not worthy of that opportunity, he will bless you so much that he'll show you that unconditional love that he has for you. So why would I say that? Because that morning at the conclusion of Shivratri, I was seated in the first row. Swami comes, he finishes his darshan, but he doesn't stop there. He goes back to the ladies' side. He wants to do one more round. So as he's coming by, there is this volunteer who comes back saying that, brother, you may have to get up now, and all the people who are seated behind you, all of you get up and go to the back of the hall, because Swami might take a detour and we want to make a space for Swami to come back to the dais rather than go around. So after all this, I eventually find myself seated at the back of the hall, while I just realized that the previous 2 sessions I was seated right in front. That's when my dream started playing in my mind's eye, where for complete 3 sessions I was seated right in front of him, and here I was seated at the back of the hall at the conclusion of Shivratri, and as he promised, for the entire period of Shivratri, I was, as he showed in the dream, I was right in front of him chanting Rudram. So that was a big lesson for me, right? Even in terms of self-confidence, that's what even Swami says. So always have that self-confidence. That Swami showed it to me, saying that, even though you thought you had your own doubts, but yet I gave you the opportunity to sit right in front of me with the mic and chant Rudram as everybody were watching. So that was a beautiful dream where, as even they say, dreams related to God, or even to be more specific with Swami, are real. So the period passed, then comes the phase 3 of my stage play, if I may say, where this is post Mahasamadhi, where that was a very difficult period for all of us, right? So at the same time, after a year or 2, I had to move to Singapore to do my masters, but the move was quite difficult in the sense that I had to leave my family, I was quite attached to, and I had to let go of all my Samiti activities, move to Singapore, and it was quite difficult. I was unable to eat well, I was unable to sleep well, and all the while I've been thinking, okay, what am I really doing here? I was quite happy with my job, and I was doing my seva and all the center related activities. What am I really doing here? That's when one of the mornings I wake up feeling very tired, and I just, as a matter of fact, I just had this conversation with Swami saying, Swami, what is all this? Then somehow I doze off for a 10-minute deep sleep, such a refreshing sleep that I never had for months. And in the dream, I hear Swami's voice saying, Ni intane, jantane, ventane untane. Then I wake up so refreshed as if I slept for 8 full hours. And then it struck me that back when I was doing my undergrad, I had this dream where, my house where I currently live in Bangalore, it is adjacent to a temple. So it's an Hanuman temple predominantly. So it's a hillock on top of the hillock you have this Hanuman temple. In the dream, I get to know that Swami is in the temple. So I rush to the temple, I find the gates sealed, I jump over the compound wall, run up the hillock, panting for my breath, and I see Swami in his probably late 40s or early 50s, his sleeves rolled up, and he is cleaning up the idol with his hand. So as soon as I rush to the sanctum sanctorum, Swami turns around, smilingly he looks at me, and I somehow gaze at a clock and I say, Swami, it's 7:15. Anxious, nervous, and a bit jittery as well. Then Swami smiles back and says, don't worry, my love is always there with you. So that's when it stuck to me that in Singapore, I was always waking up around the same time, feeling tired, feeling anxious, worried about how I would complete my studies, how would I get a job, or how would I settle down here, because it was a totally new phase of life, right? Because I never lived in a hostel before, so this was totally a drastic change in my life. Then as time passes by, here I am talking, completing 8 years in Singapore. And when I again look back, I mean, everything was arranged by Swami. He took care of it so beautifully. So I would probably conclude with one dream that I had, which I cherish even to this day, was that back when I was again doing my undergrad, I had this madness of studying in Swami's institute. I wanted to be a Sai student, and I invariably gave entrance exams. Again, you name every entrance exam in Perthi, I gave it, but yet it didn't happen. But now, after I moved to Singapore, I realized that the dream that I had back then, the two dreams that I had. So one of the dreams where I see Swami standing in some construction site, and I go up to him and kneel down and they say, "Swami, I want to be your student." Then he said, "So be it, so be it." And the dream ends. Then again, probably after a year or later, I had again a dream where I see Swami in his chair, and I rush to Swami and I kneel down and I say, "Swami, I want to study in your college." Then he takes up, he just picks up an envelope which was beside him and he says, "Tisko, take it." And then the dream ends. And of late, for the past few years, whenever I started, probably contemplating on the dream even more, I realized that probably Swami meant something else. It may not be really like physically or in person studying in his institution. Probably he wants me to follow his words, live up to his expectations of being called Sai student, meaning to say, to follow his teachings, to do anything, keeping in mind that would Swami accept this? Would Swami really want me to do this? So that said, I'm still doing my best to live up to the expectations. It's still a lifetime away to be a Sai student, and I'm learning to be one. So this is probably my phase 3 of the stage play, where even though post Mahasamadhi, Swami is behind the scenes, he's still orchestrating the drama, guiding, guarding, and whatnot. So at the same time, back when I was thinking, I was missing my Samiti and back home, and to this day, Swami had made me so busy in the center that last few years have been quite busy in terms of doing seva or singing bhajans and involved in center activities. So that's what, as I say, when you pray to God, you have to be careful what you pray for. So back then I prayed that I'm not able to do anything, but here I am, like kind of happily occupied in the center doing seva for him in that capacity. So maybe I would just conclude with one short story that always touches me, right? This is about a story that talks about a conversation between a man and God, where the man looks back at his lifetime and he tells God that, Lord, when I look back in the time, so I see that there are 2 pairs of feet on the sands of time. I see that whenever I was happy, whenever I had, when I scored good grades in my exam, when I got my first job, when I had my first child, you were there with me. But during my difficult or turbulent times in my life, I see that I only see one, footprints. So did you really leave me, O Lord? Then God responds back to him saying, when you observe closely, do you really think those footprints are yours? No, those are verily mine. And during those times, I was carrying you in my arms while you, and in fact, I walked that path for you, carrying you in my arms. So those footprints are not yours, but they are verily mine. So that's been my life's journey so far. So during my difficult times, whenever I look back, I think Swami was carrying me in his arms, and I'm grateful for that, and I have that immense faith that he would continue to do so going forward as well. Sai Ram.
Sai Ram. We've heard all these wonderful experiences, and something that comes rushing into our heart is a feeling of his protection, of his grace, of his compassion at each and every point in time in our lives. In fact, one of the most important but subtle aspects of spiritual discipline or sadhana is to be able to understand His grace as His grace, to be aware that His grace is on us at this point in time. That alone gives that much needed solace and happiness to life. And how does one please Him? It's very simple. A very beautiful example, a beautiful experience of Dr. Shivshankar Sai, the erstwhile warden of the Sri Sathya Sai Senior Boys Hostel, Prashantinilayam, also the director of the campus, head of the department, a person who has held multiple titles in his firmament over the years. It was the time of the summer course, and Swami was distributing the books, the notebooks for summer course for students to take down notes. And it so happened that the stock ran out. There were no more books, and there were still a few boys left to get those books. Now, Dr. Shivshankar Sai, oblivious to this fact, came running to Swami and said, Swami, there are still a few boys who haven't got the books. And then Swami went inside the interview room, and as if he came out with a lot of sympathy, as if very apologetically, Swami came out and said, those books got over, those notebooks got over. I have these books instead, which could be given to the boys, and you give this to them. And that is when Dr. Shivshankar Sai understood the gravity of the situation. So he took those books and said, no, Swami, no problem. Let me take these books and distribute. It's after all a notebook. And he went and distributed them. Now it was the turn of the teachers, and Swami wanted to distribute the notebooks to the teachers, and he called Dr. Shivshankar Sai for assistance. So Dr. Shivshankar Sai was holding the bundle of books, and Swami was picking one notebook after another and distributing it to the teachers. After the distribution was over, Swami went amidst the teachers and asked them if everyone received the book, to which everyone responded, yes, Swami. And then Swami went to another end of the group and asked and inquired if everyone received. And they said, yes, Swami too. In that way, Swami almost went around asking, and 4 or 5 times Swami asked if everyone received the books. And everyone said yes. But there was one person who still didn't get, and he kept silent, and that was Dr. Shivshankar Sai. Swami finally came to him and asked, Niko Chinda, it means, did you get the book? And at that point in time, Dr. Shivshankar Sai was in a fix. He did not know how to respond. Would Swami get angry at him because he literally asked 5 times? And each and every one of those times, he just didn't reply. But deep down within, what was going on in his mind? He saw that apologetic face of Swami when he ran out of books. When Swami came out of that interview room, the kind of face Swami put, it was so sympathetic that, oh, the books got over. He didn't want to inconvenience Swami once again. And with that feeling, he wanted to leave it aside. He didn't want to inconvenience Swami at all. And when Swami asked him, did you get the book? He prayed to the Swami within and responded to the Swami outside, and he said, Swami, how much have you given me in life? Would one notebook matter? Would I crib because I didn't get one notebook? How much have you blessed me with in this life? The moment that statement was made, Swami says he keeps acting all the time, but when you submit to him, when you make a plea, a prayer, that profound, that with that simplicity from the bottom of your heart, he drops that garb of pretense and he literally becomes yours. And that is when Swami literally pulled the cheeks of the warden. He was pulling the cheeks of Dr. Shiv Shankar Sai, and he kept fondling his cheeks and kept telling me, how happy have you made me today? How happy have you made me today? Yanta santosham ichevra iroju. Yanta santosham, yanta santosham. In some sorts, this year has been a challenging one in various ways. Amidst all of these, if we are able to make it through, if we are able to see through this phase and be present to witness yet another glorious birthday celebration of his, despite all the challenges that we faced, if we can say, Swami, there is so much that you have given me. Thank you, Swami. Thank you so much. That one small act of gratitude, how happy would it make Swami? Very beautifully when Swami said, I keep receiving a lot of prayers where people keep asking me this, people keep asking me that, but rarely have I received an acknowledgement of what I have done. I have rarely received a letter in which somebody said, thank you, Swami. Probably on his birthday, one of the gifts that we can give him is to express our heartfelt gratitude and tell him, yeah, there is so much you have given us, Swami. There is literally so much you have given us. We thank you. We thank you for every small and big thing. We thank you for this life. We thank you that you became a part of our lives. Is there anything more that we can ask for? This has been a wonderful series, a garland of beautiful pearls, of beautiful experiences, either in the form of that wonderful Krishna, the Bhagavata Vahini, or an incessant flow of Divine Mother, Prema Vahini, or the act of service that one renders as considering it as his dharma, the Dharma Vahini, or carry him in the sanctum sanctorum of our hearts as Prashanti Vahini. I'm sure each one of us has such wonderful experience. It's just a bane of time in some sense that we cannot capture everything, but I'm sure in due course of time we all will have this opportunity to listen to more of you. This is just a reminder how the Lord has touched each and every one of our hearts. The term Vahini in some sense means a carrier, a messenger. That book has been his messenger or his message. That book carried that message so that when it gets into our hearts, when it seeps into our hearts, we become his messengers. How beautifully has Swami said, my life is my message, but in due course of time, your lives must become my message. And with that prayer and that humble submission, I take this opportunity on behalf of all of us who put forth this small presentation in front of you all on this happy and joyous occasion of his birthday. Wish you all a very happy birthday. Jai Sai Ram.
ప్రేమ స్వరూపులారా,
Embodiments of love.
యుగములు గడిచినప్పటికీ, జగమును కదిలినప్పటికీ మానవుని యొక్క హృదయము మారటం లేదు.
Though ages have passed, generations have left, human heart has not yet been transformed.
చదువులు మితిమీరిపోతున్నవి.
We find education on the ever rise.
విద్యలు చాలా అల్లోలములుగా గావిస్తున్నవి.
The education is adding to the confusion and
ఈ
agitation.
విద్యల వల్ల మానవుని యొక్క హృదయము మారుతుందని భావిస్తున్నారు.
We think that there will be reformation in human heart by education.
నిజమే, మారుతున్నవి. ఏ విధంగా మారుతున్నవి?
It is changing, no doubt, but how is it happening?
అతి విచిత్రమైనటువంటి మార్గమును అవలంబిస్తున్నవి.
It is following a distorted, perverted way.
మానవుడు నేర్చుకోవలసినటువంటి విషయాలు నేర్చుకోవటం లేదు.
Man is not acquiring, is not learning what is
పశుభాగతి
the culture of Bharat.
అనేకత్వంలోని ఏకత్వాన్ని గుర్తించి మానవత్వాన్ని సార్థకం కావటమే ఇది పవిత్రమైన సంస్కృతి.
Wants us to realize the unity in diversity and work for the liberation of one's own self.
కానీ ఈనాడు దానిని విరుద్ధమైన మార్గంలో అవలంబిస్తున్నాడు.
But we are following the contradictory procedure.
ఏకత్వాన్ని అనేకత్వంగా విభజిస్తున్నాడు.
In fact, we are fragmenting the one into multiplicity.
ఏతో కూడినటువంటి యొక్క భారతీయులు వేద సంస్కృతిని మాత్రం విస్మరించక దివ్యమైన భావములతో భవ్యమైనటువంటి నడకలతో కాలమును సార్థకంగా గావించుకుంటూ వచ్చాడు పూర్వీకులు.
The ancients spent their time in full comprehension of the unity and diversity, enjoying the divinity which is novel and ever fresh.
ఈనాటి ఆధునిక యుగం రాకపో పూర్వమే
Prior to the beginning of this modern age,
ప్రాచీనపు ఋషులు, ప్రాచీనపు సంస్కృతులు, ప్రాచీనపు పెద్దలు అనేక విధములుగా అందరి యొక్క అన్యోన్యతను ఐకమత్యను ఆశించుకుంటూ వచ్చారు.
prior to this modern age, the ancients, the sages and seers and the culture wanted a kind of harmony and the unity in the community.
ఎట్టి కలిసిమెలిసి ఉండటము కనిపించటం లేదు.
We don't find any happy mingling together.
ఒక్క ఇంటిలో నలుగురు ఉంటే నలుగురికి నాలుగు భావములు వేరువేరుగా ఉంటాయి.
The four residents at home have different opinions.
ఐకమత్యమే మానవ జీవితము.
Unity is the human life.
ఆచరణే దాని యొక్క గమ్యము.
And that happens to be his goal.
అట్టి దివ్యమైనటువంటి యొక్క ఐకమత్యమును ఈనాడు కోల్పోతున్నాం.
Such divine unity is lost today.
ఆధ్యాత్మికమనగా ఏమిటి దీని అర్థము?
What is the meaning of spirituality?
ఏదో ఆది ఆత్మను స్మరించడమే ఆధ్యాత్మికమనుకుంటున్నారు.
We think the thinking of the constant
కాదు
self.
కాదు కాదు
No.
కాదు. మానవుని యందున్నటువంటి పశుత్వాన్ని హింసించి
One has to kill the animality,
మానవత్వాన్ని దైవత్వంగా మార్చుకోవటమే ఇది ఆధ్యాత్మికము.
transform the human nature into the divine.
ఎక్కడ మార్చుకుంటున్నారు?
Where are we doing?
మానవత్వాన్ని పశుత్వంగా మార్చుకుంటున్నారు.
In fact, the human life has become demonic.
దైవత్వంగా మార్చుకున్నట్టుకు తగిన కృషి చేయటం లేదు.
We are not making effort to transform
ఇది
the divine
ఆధ్యాత్మికము.
quality. In fact, that is true spirituality.
ఇలాంటి పవిత్రమైనటువంటి యొక్క ఆధ్యాత్మిక తత్వాన్ని ఈనాడు విస్మరిస్తున్నాడు మానవుడు.
Such beautiful nature, inborn nature spirituality is forgotten.
ఆధ్యాత్మికములుగా ఏదో కొన్ని వంటలు వండుకోవటము భుజించటము ఈనాడు పండుగ అని దీని పండుగ రూపం లోపల వ్యర్థం
We
గావించుకుంటున్నారు.
consider spirituality as a matter of celebration with festivity and gaiety.
అది కాదు ఆధ్యాత్మికము.
That's not spirituality.
ఏ పవిత్రమైన పర్వదినములు మనకు ప్రాప్తిస్తున్నాయో ఆ పర్వదినముల యొక్క ప్రధానమైనటువంటి లక్ష్యాన్ని చింతించుకుంటూ స్మరించుకుంటూ సార్థకం చేసుకోవాలి.
In fact, we should think of this inner significance of every festival. Think of them, ponder
నేను
over.
మానవుడను కాదు, నేను మానవత్వంతో కూడినటువంటి ఒక దైవత్వాన్ని అని భావించాలి.
I'm not simply human. I have got the divinity within. That should be our life.
అప్పుడే తన యందున్నటువంటి పశుత్వము దూరం అవుతుంది.
Then only the animality will distance itself.
స్వరూపులారా,
Embodiments of
ఏ
love.
రాజ్యమైనా కానీ,
Whatever may be,
ఏ రాష్ట్రమైనా కానీ,
whatever state,
ఏ దేశమైనా కానీ,
any country,
ఏ ప్రాంతమైనా కానీ,
any region,
ఏ లింగమైనా కానీ,
any
ఏ
time,
వ్యక్తి అయినా కానీ,
any person,
కానీ మానవుని యందు మానవత్వం అనేటువంటి దాన్ని మర్చిపోకుండా కాపాడుకోవాలి.
at any period of time, anywhere, any region, any state, any country, no
కేవలం
one should
తన
forget the
స్వార్థమునే
human
లక్ష్యం
quality.
ఉంచుకొని
We should keep it in our view.
కాలంను సార్థకం కావించుకోకుండా పోకూడదు.
And we should never waste our time.
ఈనాడు ఒక న్యూస్ పేపర్ మనం చదువుతున్నాము.
Today we go through the newspaper.
కానీ చదివిన పేపరే చదివి ఎవరు కూడా చదవరు కదా.
You don't read the same old newspaper.
ఈనాడు చదివినటువంటి పేపర్ రేపు వేస్ట్ పేపర్ అయిపోతుంది.
Today's newspaper is tomorrow's waste paper.
కానీ
But
మనము అట్టి న్యూస్ పేపర్ను ఏనాటికి చదువుతున్నాం, ఎప్పటికీ చదువుతున్నాం అనుకుంటాం. అది చదవడానికి వీలు కాదు.
it's not possible to read the same old newspaper.
ఒక్కతోరి మనకి ఈ జన్మం లభించింది.
The life is gifted to us.
ఈ జన్మం మనం అనుభవించాము.
We should experience it.
చాలు ఇంకా.
That's all.
వచ్చే జన్మమే మనకు అక్కర్లేదు.
Let's not have the next life.
ఇంకొక న్యూస్ పేపర్ మనం తీసుకొని అక్కర్లేదు.
Let's not
ఈ
accept
న్యూస్
go to
పేపర్
another newspaper. This
దీన్ని
is,
మనం చదివినాము, దీన్ని అనుభవించాము, ఆనందించాము, దుఃఖపడ్డాము, విచారపడ్డాము, అన్ని పదాలు మనం అనుభవించాము.
This is enough, this is final. We have gone through the newspaper. We have gone through varied experience of pleasure and pain. That is enough for the day.
భగవంతుడా, ఈ న్యూస్ పేపర్ నాకు ఈనాడు ఇచ్చావు.
God, you have given me this newspaper today.
అన్ని అనుభవించవలసిందంతా అనుభవించాను.
I went through all experiences.
రెండవ న్యూస్ పేపర్ నాకు అక్కర్లేదు.
I don't want this.
రెండవ జన్మ నాకు అక్కర్లేదు. ఆనందం అనేటువంటి మనకు లభ్యం కావాలంటే,
in order to acquire this
ఈ
bliss,
ప్రకృతి వస్తువాహనాదుల వల్ల కాదు,
it's not possible in the world of
ప్రకృతి యొక్క కార్యకర్మనాదుల వల్ల కాదు,
it's not by any way,
గ్రంథ పఠనం చేత కాదు,
not by scholarship,
పెద్దల దర్శన స్పర్శన సంభాషణ వల్ల కాదు,
it's not by kind of vision or
నీ
touch.
హృదయాన్ని పవిత్రం గావించుకున్న దినమే నీకు భగవంతుడు సాక్షాత్కరిస్తాడు.
That day when you make your heart sacred, you can experience God.
అందరినీ ప్రేమించు,
Love all.